The Imperial Judges in Final Fantasy XII are among the starkest and visually memorable characters to come out of the game, and were taken so far as to represent the game as the thematic Armano painting chosen for the logo. Yet beyond their stark design, and perhaps informing it, is a fascinating set of historic, cultural and symbolic references that weave credibly into the game story of Final Fantasy XII, and it's interesting to reflect and consider precisely why the judges, and specifically the elite judge magisters like Gabranth, work so well and leave such a lasting impression on this rendition of an Ivalice world. Jumping right in and looking first to visual design, the judges, like many aspects of the Ivalice titles, trade on a distinctly medieval aesthetic portrayed in heavy plate armour, particularly the sort of ostentatious armour that we see in jousting and coming out of the Renaissance era. More specifically to the Judge Magisters, and most starkly, we have their ostentatious helmets, which give a unique impression of each individual character, while at the same time concealing their features by way of a masked visor. And this is a huge contributing factor to their appeal, which offers a sense of ominous, forbidding power to the Judge Magisters, and references, I think, several cultural and pop cultural factors. First off, and perhaps most obviously, we have the analogues to Star Wars. Now, Final Fantasy XII is rich in nods to the Star Wars series, whether it's the cast of heroes, the setting, the locations, and so on, and the connotations of masked villains or masked government officials does equally lend to the Star Wars universe, where we have the likes of Darth Vader, the Emperor's Elite Guard, the Stormtroopers, and so on. And even after the fact of Final Fantasy XII's release, we have Kylo Ren and these fleeting glimpses of the Knights of Ren in the sequel trilogy, which have this similar distinction and unique aesthetic to the Judge Magisters. But delving into this a little bit more, we have the function and impact of masked officials more broadly. Now, I personally find masks a fascinating aspect of human civilization, which for millennia have formed an important symbolic, performative, and practical function across different cultures. Indeed, returning to Star Wars, the Stormtroopers and Elite Guard have masks that tenuously echo the form and function of gas masks and pilot masks from the World War I and World War II eras, while Darth Vader, more famously, has a combined helmet and mask that draws influence from the contoured samurai kabuto and the menacing menpo armour that was increasingly popularised throughout the 16th century. What masks in this fashion do is give a sense of the formidable and the imposing, but also of a uniformity and an authority. The anonymity of a mask removes a sense of the individual or something that we can personally relate to, and represents instead something else entirely, and in this case, the Empire. Turning to the judges of Final Fantasy XII, this is certainly something that carries over, and they both symbolically and practically represent the firm hand of the Archadian Empire, and their hybridised role as a military and a judiciary function, a one-man judge, jury, and executioner. And this makes the masks doubly important in creating a sense of impartiality. And indeed, their function in Final Fantasy XII is not entirely dissimilar to the judges of 2000 AD's Judge Dredd. And creator John Wagner wrote of the Dredd character that he too never shows his face, not simply because justice is impartial or blind, but also, in these worlds, because it has no soul. So it's very interesting the way that fictions create this removal of self, this removal of conscience from authoritarian figures and structures by way of using masked helmets. Now, moving forward into the machinations of Final Fantasy XII, in more informal situations in the game, we do see the elite judges without their masks and their helmets on, and these are often scenes of politicking and scheming that take place in the corridors of Arcades, and is so particular to the narrative style of Final Fantasy XII. And this aspect of the judges touches on arguably the biggest influence on the game outside of Star Wars, particularly looking at the Arcadians specifically, which is the form and function of the Roman Empire, And indeed, where the Emperor in this setting is beset by and embattled with the elected consuls of the Senate, much like the Roman political format, the Judge Magisters, in their elite role as military, judicial and political figures, are reminiscent of and a very interesting amalgam of the Roman generals and the Praetorian Guard. For example, we have judges such as Judge Drace, whose sole agenda is to protect and elevate Lord Larsa, and this is much the function of what the Praetorian Guard would be. But more broadly, like the Roman generals, we see them campaigning for the empire further afield, and most importantly, scheming among themselves to further political agendas, whether that's elevating Vayne, defeating Vayne, or coveting power for themselves. And I've discussed Final Fantasy XII at length before regarding this very unique political focus, of which the judges play a very significant part. So I love how the judges work in this game. On the surface they are these arbiters of justice, but scratching below the surface they are self-interested and in some cases entirely corrupt entities that, despite the majesty of their visual appearance, are down in the muck of political squabbling. It's also prudent to note that the judges are pertinent to several character arcs, with the most obvious being Gabranth, who is deeply tied to Bash's arc as a central character, and latterly both Balthier and the guest character Redus, who later abscond from being judges respectively and become sky pirates. So these additions are kind of intriguing, I think, and an effort was made to show how much of the game and the game's characters orbit around the judges and by extension the Empire among the central cast, but it wasn't really developed any more than a passing mention, which is a bit of a shame because I think there was opportunity here to develop the idea of these military political judiciars a little bit more. But ultimately excellently realised and visually striking characters that really represent and strike at the heart of the unique political game that Final Fantasy XII was, and they really helped craft the idea of the Archadian Empire and what it was all about. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider joining me on Patreon, or if you'd like to buy me a coffee, you can do so, the links are available below.